think without further ado, let's get started. We'll hop right in because we have so much to cover today. And I know you all submitted really great questions, so I want to get to as many of those as we possibly can. So um, my name's Carly. I'm the marketing manager at MemoryFox. I'm first just going to kick it off by introducing our two guest speakers today. So first, I'd like to introduce Chris Miano. Chris is the founder and CEO of MemoryFox. He spent 8 years in the Army traveling around the world and learning about the power of storytelling as a tool to connect with people across cultures, generations, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Since then, Chris has made it his mission to elevate the stories of real human beings, and he believes that through authentic storytelling, the world can become a more inclusive and equitable place for everyone. So thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Thank you.
And now I'll introduce my next guest, which is Gung Wong. He is the CEO of Civic Champs, where he leads a team of passionate change leaders to create technology solutions to create a seamless and rewarding volunteering experience for both the volunteers and the service organizations. But prior to Civic Champs, Gung co-founded two and sold two companies, RentJuggle.com, which is an apartment search engine, and Community Elf, which is a social media management firm. Gung is also a former McKinsey & Company consultant, and he is a graduate of Michigan State University and Harvard Business School. So thanks so much for coming and joining and being a part of our special event today, Gung.
Yeah, of course. No, this will be great. I'm super excited.
Awesome. And then just a reminder for everybody here that's attending, we do have a 3-part agenda today. So first, Chris is going to explore the power of video storytelling, and that's going to include how to collect volunteer stories, but also strategies to actually create videos. And then second, we have Gung. He's going to delve into the trends and strategies of how you can share those powerful volunteer stories on social media in the year 2024. So the most up-to-date trends for you all. And then third, like I said, you all submitted really wonderful questions during your registration, and I have a ton of them that I'm going to ask our two experts today. I'm going to do my best to get to as many as possible. So again, thank you all for registering. Thank you for submitting those thoughtful questions. And without further ado, I think, Chris, it's your turn. Take it away.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Carly. It's funny, we talk about storytelling so much, and I always feel like the hardest story in the world to hear is when someone's telling your story. I always have a hard time
Your
with that.
own
The veteran
bio,
thing,
yeah.
or if it's no, thank you for the introductions and for putting this all together. All right, can you guys see my screen? All right. So, I like to think about video storytelling along this sort of frame, right? If someone asks you, what is your mission? Can you show them, right? It's always better to show rather than tell. Video stories and general storytelling content is the best way to resonate with potential donors and attract volunteers, right? Storytelling is fundamental to who we are as humans. And so I'm sort of a stats nerd, right? I always want stats to back up, what people are saying. So let's take a look at the stats of why video storytelling is so important, right? Number one, you'll raise more funds, which is, of course, the most important one maybe of all, right? Fundraising campaigns that incorporate video receive 114% more funding than campaigns that don't on average. And that was a study that Classy did a couple of years back, and I think that makes sense, right? Video really gives you a window into the people and the mission, like nothing else. Second, it's more memorable. Viewers retain vastly more information when they see it through video. People telling stories to each other is a primal human function. Long before people could even read, this is how information was transferred. From Virgil, to Homer, to the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's the oldest tradition that we have. Everybody historically has told stories long before they could read or video even existed. And third, it is what people crave. Short form video, like on Instagram or TikTok, has exploded as attention spans have sort of dovetailed, right? And so we want to tell stories about our impact that meet the taste of the times. We could howl at the moon about the way we wish things could be, or we could meet the times, on their own terms. I feel like sort of in a way, a lot of nonprofits have been given an impossible task of standing out in like this increasingly crowded attention economy, right? And but authentic grassroots impact video with community generated content, it helps level the playing field. Very few, if any, for-profits can compete with a very beautiful video of a grassroots event that you're having or program. And an example of that is one of our customers, Kids Health Connections. They collected community generated video stories to demonstrate qualitative impact for a grant application. And they wanted to give a window into their mission. And it worked. And they got the grant, right? Because they had beautiful videos like this. Let's watch it.
I love the mentors and
It's a little
I love
choppy.
that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time. And we're strong, fit kids.
I mean, like, that's the most beautiful content in the world. I don't even want to call it content. It's almost gross to call it content. This is a story about a family, a person, and an organization. Authentic, engaging video that takes the funders right into the living room, takes those volunteers that you want to win over or make feel more connected, takes them right in there when they can't be there. Obviously this is a pretty cool example and something that I feel is pretty powerful. So hopefully that gets everybody's juices flowing. We've got a great example and we've got some statistics to back up why. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today and you'll be telling great stories with video in no time. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to build a video collection campaign and then some examples of volunteer stories and the keys to the success of those volunteer campaigns. Some tips to get started collecting great volunteer stories, and then types of videos that you can create on your own and how to actually do it. Some real, hopefully practical applications of how to make video work for you. So we have a simple framework that we use at MemoryFox to help develop video strategy. And when I say simple, it is super, super, super simple. I was very busy. You don't need to remember all these things. It doesn't have to be hard, and video is accessible to everybody, especially if you use this sort of tried and true strategy. So step one, before you even go talk to someone, start at the end result. What are we trying to accomplish here? Is it for a social media campaign, a donor report, for a grant, for a gala? What type of content would be best? A slideshow, a single video, a snippet for Instagram stories? All of that is going to sort of shape the way that you're going to conduct this campaign. And if you start at the end, you'll save yourself a lot of time rather than the reverse. Start at the end is always a best practice. Step two, what type of content will satisfy the requirements for step one? Do we want testimonials, or do we want maybe video of the mission in action? Do we want videos from mission beneficiaries? Do we want it from volunteers, donors, etc., staff who feel passionate about the mission? Start thinking about what the actual inputs are going to be. And then finally, the call to actions. In a lot of ways, maybe the most important part, the questions that you ask, because great questions result in great answers, and bad questions will cause people to lock up, and you're really you're not going to get something that you can use. So really, to wrap it up, like I said, it's very, very simple. What do you want to accomplish? What type of content will help you achieve that? And then what call to actions will help you get that content? Now, this is just the ground floor of your campaign. But once you have this part all wrapped up, the rest is all just in the execution. But without this, you're going to waste a lot of time doing things that aren't really getting you a lot of gains. So that short form video that we showed you earlier, right, that they were able to win that grant with, they use that simple format, right? They're a very busy organization. They don't have time for all these complicated, steps, right? Keep it simple, keep it focused, and it worked well for them. Carly is actually going to drop in the chat a link to some of the resources that we have, so you can build your own campaigns. Just use this template if you'd like, and let us know if you have any feedback on it, because we're always kind of working on this. So we have some questions from the audience that we took beforehand, and I'll kind of go through these right now. So how do we encourage our current volunteers to provide content like videos and photos? I'm sure you're all wondering this right now, right? It's easy to say, but the execution is much harder. And so we have some examples that I think will hopefully crystallize some things for you. So Arbor Day Foundation, amazing organization, right? They are wildly successful with collecting content from all of their tree planting events because they're extremely organized. We find that organizations who truly care for the content and the stories that volunteers contribute, they actually get a higher participation rate because the organization knows you're going to be a good steward for it and they're not just wasting their time. They also tied the collection campaigns to a specific outcome. For example, they designated a corporate sponsor for each of the collection campaigns, American Express, FedEx, Verizon, and that makes it a little tangible for the storytellers. That'll give them a purpose and will definitely increase your response rate. Now it is a little more work, obviously to be organized at the beginning, but it's going to pay dividends in the end, in both your response rate and the quality of your end product. Slow Food Bank, they use MemoryFox in several ways, including for volunteer retention and recruitment. Their key to success is consistent recognition. And I'm sure if you're a volunteer manager, you're thinking about this all the time, right? Is making volunteers feel rewarded and that they're a part of the team, right? That they're a part of the community. They post a monthly volunteer spotlight on their social channels and in their newsletter, and being featured makes their volunteers feel appreciated, right? As one would expect. So every time you do a program, or every time, maybe once a month or in your newsletter, highlight a volunteer, have a story from them or a story about them. And I think you'll see a lot of, it pay a lot of dividends in terms of volunteer retention and just generally making them feel like more of the team. And then this one is really cool. There's this organization, maybe some of you have heard of, it's called Wreaths Across America, and they do wreath layings in cemeteries across the U.S. Over 4,000 cemeteries across the country. And their key to success is multiple touch points. They were able to collect over 8,000 pieces of content from over 1,000 contributors. Imagine trying to do that, right, with like Google Sheets and email, right? And people submitted photos, videos, beautiful, beautiful things that they use now throughout the entire year. But the key is they followed up multiple times. They didn't just have one ask or one on the newsletter that says like, hey, send us your videos. That's okay. But a direct ask and then following up if you don't get a response. No one ever gets annoyed from asking to tell their story. Usually not, right? They feel strongly about the organization. It's not asking for a donation, right? You're always asking for donations. Ask for something a little different. And this is a great way to do it, right? But follow up. Following up is the most important thing, and that'll increase your response rate drastically. All right. So next question. How do you get volunteers to actually participate in videos? Also a very difficult thing. I'm sure many of you have experienced. We like to think of it as like generating the domino effect, especially at your programs and events, is set up like a booth. Now, typically you might set up a photo booth or something, but consider a story booth. Where you can set up and have people be standing in line, people waiting to get through. They'll be talking about it throughout your, at the event to other people. Generate that enthusiasm for it, and you will see that people will now be interested and come on over. So make sure you tell that person after they submit, hey, tell others. We're trying to get as many stories as we can today, and they'll go tell others. But create that domino effect that keeps people, that brings a little attention to it. This is extremely important. Designate a content collection champion. Someone, whether it's a volunteer or employee, or, it could be anybody, right? But their job, they're going to have a list of the people who are going to be at the event, the type of content that the communications manager or the marketing director wants from that event. And then their job is to go execute on that. You will definitely 100% get better results rather than just putting up QR codes that link to a campaign where they can submit videos or just hoping that people will do it, right? But have someone wear the hat and they'll go around and make sure that it happens. another one, ask great questions to get great stories. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but here's some good examples. So instead of tell us your story, you might want to say, put a little meat on it. How has your life been impacted by volunteering with this organization, right? Make it feel a little more crystallized. Tell us about the volunteer work you do. Well, that might be open-ended and they might not be able to answer that question. Tell us about the first time you volunteered with the organization. How did it make you feel? Right? Like that's a real meaty question that'll get a great answer. And then now you can use that to attract other volunteers and or you know, if it's donor facing, attract donors. But really think about those questions and how you can get to the heart and the core of why they do what they do. And so these are some, you know, we're talking about volunteer stories, right? So here's some specific ones that we've seen customers use, you know, specific to volunteer collection campaigns. So one volunteer experience you'll never forget, your initial inspiration to volunteer, all those types of things that make you feel, that make them feel warm and fuzzy and they want to share. You know, and we'll be sending out this presentation, so don't feel the need to take notes or anything like that. But I just want to hit some of these, you know, because they're pretty straightforward, but it's all in how you craft it. And this one's my favorite because it's Carly, and Carly's amazing. She has a mantra, you know, they can't say yes if you never ask. And sometimes it can be a little, you get afraid to ask people for their story, or you don't want to add a task to their list of things to do and things like that. But Carly is fearless, and that's why we love her. One of the reasons we love her. She reached out to an actual Vietnam Medal of Honor recipient named Colonel Barney Barnum, and he actually served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So this guy is a big deal, right? And she fearlessly asked him to attend an event, and of course he did. And he shared his story, and he helped them raise funds, and he made a donation himself. And none of that would have happened if she didn't have the bravery to ask. So don't not be afraid to ask someone their story. People love sharing their story. Now we'll talk a little bit in the Q&A about collecting stories from people who may not want to share their story and the nuances of that, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's about creating that culture of storytelling so that you're always collecting and telling stories along multiple channels and getting to people who can help you with your you know, help spread the word. From another one from the audience. Just trying to learn the most I can about creating effective, inexpensive video content, right? I mean, that's pretty much what it all comes down to. So selfies. Selfie videos are some of the most engaging content on social media, right? You see it all the time when you're scrolling on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever. I mean, TikTok basically that's what it is. So here are some tips. You can actually follow Carly on TikTok. We have a TikTok account now. So if you, although I was very much averse to that, I think as sort of a Luddite, no, it's been great and we get a lot of cool engagement on it. But Carly likes to share a lot of tips on how to do things like take selfie videos and things like that. So if that's something you're interested, go ahead, give her a follow. But here are some top tips. I mean, keep it short, right? That might be the most important one out of all of this is keep it short. People just don't have the attention spans anymore. And be concise, right? Get right to it. But make sure the audio is good. Make sure the video quality is good. But that can all be done with phones now. So it's nothing difficult about it. So I do want to touch on this now. So anonymous video ideas. So let's say you have a mission beneficiary who might be a child or a victim of some sort of abuse or, you know, or may just not feel comfortable telling their stories. Plenty of veterans have a difficult time telling their story, right? But you still need it for fundraising. So you can do a lot of different things here. You could record a voiceover testimonial that goes over a picture, right? Or just is somehow anonymous. Use visuals that sort of relate to your mission, right? Showing hands, showing maybe a teddy bear or a painting or something that evokes some sort of symbolic core feeling from them. But doesn't show who the person is, right? Symbolic and tying a knot, leaves falling, packing a suitcase. Or you could tell the stories of an inanimate object because that tells the story, right? A delivery food truck, a hammer, a brown paper bag. These are just examples, right? But they all evoke sort of that imagery while keeping the storytelling anonymous. Because you still need to tell those stories to get the effects that you need. And so finally, composite videos. These are really fun, and I think Carly put in one of our that we did.
planting, now feeding, now shelter and aid, on veterans, on families, oh, the joy to be made. To the top of the story page, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all.
So that's just an example. We took a little, oh, so go. We took a little clip of a longer one that we shared on Instagram and I think TikTok too, maybe, and LinkedIn. But, you know, mash up these videos and you can make a nice recap of a program or event by having, you know, a dozen volunteers talking about how great the event was. Then mash them up into a composite video, you know, and use some of these tips. Everybody wants to read the words. But yeah, composite videos are amazing and really consider them. We'll talk a little bit about tools later on how to do that. But yeah, so I think we got the first part started. I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Gung, and he's going to take it from here to the how to actually put your stories into motion and get them out into the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. That was awesome. I think I'll be sort of reflecting on some of the things that that you've already mentioned as well. So again, my name is Gung Wang. I'm here with Civic Champs. And so one thing real quickly, right, we shared in my background is I used to own a social media management agency called Community Elf, and one of my favorite campaigns we did was actually with a nonprofit called the Dignity and Respect Campaign. And so this is a long time ago. But during that campaign, we were able to grow their Facebook following, right, from 820 to over 10,000 in just 4 months, right? And then at the end of the year, they were at 160,000 or so followers at the time. Everything changed when, you know, Facebook changed their algorithms and you couldn't get the sort of the organic reach that we used to be able to get. But it was great. It was, you know, sort of our first foray. You know, the other one that comes to mind, less nonprofit related, is we were managing Mark Wahlberg's GNC line of supplements called Get Marked. And so that was really, you know, that was a little bit fun and different, but it's you know, we would have people message about like prompt proposals and things like that. So but I think it's important for me, right, just to kind of set the stage as we're thinking about recruiting volunteers or engaging volunteers on social media, right? And so one of the things I like to think about, just taking a step back real quick, right, is just to think, you know, across the marketing funnel, right? So like, what does marketing do? Like, why have these social channels, right? Like, these are sort of the things that we're looking for, right? So we're driving awareness, we're trying to get interest, right? We want people to be involved, we want to retain them, we want them to share our mission. And video, I think, is so powerful in that it actually can touch every stage of that funnel, right? But I think generally, when you think about social, right, you're really thinking about the top or the bottom of the funnel. So the top is really driving awareness, right, and thinking about sharing or getting that people to reshare your stories, right? And so as you're thinking about your strategy and what content to do, having, I think, that context, especially if you're making the video just for social, this makes a difference, right? So you're like, okay, well, the purpose is to get awareness. All right, how am I going to do that, right? If the purpose is not to necessarily drive involvement or, right, get its retention. Now, video, right, across the board does all of that, but just, you know, keeping that in mind, right? I think the other thing from a context standpoint that I thought was really interesting is volunteering and sort of the interest of volunteering is kind of at an all-time high, right? And so this is just Google search trends. Anyone can look this up today, but you could see, right, in the past is how many people are searching for the word volunteering opportunities near me. And so in January 2018, this is, you know, sort of the line, boom, and then of course everyone knows what happened here. I'm pretty sure this is March of 2020 right here. Right, and there's a little bit of spike above as people were trying to help neighbors helping neighbors, came back down again, and then really as we came out of COVID, right, sort of towards this, people got really excited, and now we're really higher than ever, right, in terms of interest. And so the opportunity, I think, is there as you're sharing and driving awareness that people are interested in hearing about these stories and want to know how to get involved and participate. And so storytelling, I don't need, Chris is the expert here, right? But it's really about compelling narratives, right? Conveying that mission, impact, and values, sharing those personal, emotional accounts of that story, all the things that Chris has already said. So I won't stay here. But in terms of the platforms, as we think about storytelling and with recruiting volunteers on social, right? Here's the basic platforms that we think about. So there's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, right? I think a couple things I would highlight, right, is LinkedIn probably is underutilized in my mind, right? It's for professionals, right, for the most part. But if you think about volunteering, other than for kids, volunteering is very much of that part of that professional portfolio for a lot of folks. They talk, people will list where they volunteer. It's part of that resume, right? And it's one of the few places that's built for recruiting, right? And that's usually for recruiting employees, but it's really not all that different for recruiting volunteers, right? Because there's so many filters that you can use on LinkedIn, right? Who lives around me, right? What are their jobs? And so you can even customize your message, right? Like, hey, Chris, I see you're a big supporter of children, causes that support children in the Buffalo community, right? That's amazing, right? And we have this nonprofit. We'd love for you to come out to volunteer one day, right? That is like a compelling message because you took the time to know me, my interests, and you found me, right? And that you can do on LinkedIn. You can't actually really do that on the other platforms. So Instagram is fantastic and that is highly visual, right? So from a storytelling standpoint, videos, you can put that on Instagram. Facebook is sort of the de facto. I think the challenge with Facebook is one, it's fewer younger users. And now it's really hard if you're not already on there with a big platform to grow that platform without really using ads. They've kind of made it a pay to play sort of platform, right? And then Twitter, right? I'm a little bit mixed here. I think for national organizations, Twitter's fantastic. For maybe your local organizations, it's a little bit less effective, right? And so what does the data say, as Chris said earlier, right, in terms of nonprofits using different platforms? So 99% of nonprofits have a Facebook page, right? Twitter, Instagram, super popular, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Snapchat. So TikTok, right, very relatively unused, Snapchat almost none, right? Which makes sense. It's very much a person-to-person communication channel. So this is sort of what it looks like, at least according to Statista, right? My sense is that these numbers might be a little bit higher than what we've seen, but a lot of this is self-reported, and so the person that's filling out this form might be someone that's on this webinar as an example who might be more prone to be using platform. But you can see directionally where people are at and where maybe there's opportunity, including YouTube, right? And so if you think about video again, YouTube obviously being a really great platform. Another platform that I like to highlight that people don't think about as much, that I think could, just like LinkedIn, could be really great for nonprofits is actually Nextdoor. Unlike donations, where we can donate to anyone, any causes, globally, nationally, etc., volunteering is by definition a very local activity, right? You can't, it's very hard, and most people don't volunteering outside of their local community. And Nextdoor is a platform that's all about your local community, right? Neighborhood specifically, but really around like your city and so thinking about and I know one of the things that they're trying to do is really to make the platform more positive. And there's very little there's almost nothing else that is more positive than bringing the community together in volunteering, right? Like, we can all agree that people that are in need of housing, in need of food, in need of shelter in our communities, we can all support that, right? And that maybe have Nextdoor, get away a little bit more from the complaints from the neighbors, sort of things, right? And so I think this is actually another place, recruiting volunteers, promoting events that folks should really check out. And then a couple, again, we'll have the slides here shared out, but, just a couple tips, if you will, right? And so if you think about trying to be efficient across the board, right? And you're saying, hey, I wanna post, but I don't want to do custom things for every platform. Well, some of the things that you can think about is there are limits, right, for certain platforms. And so if you are on Twitter, maybe you start with Twitter as the pithy, like little snippet, right? Because then you don't have to rewrite it for Twitter, right? Or if you're on Instagram, right, the square image is optimal, and so you optimize for that, and then you could use the same image in other places. Number of images, again, Twitter has this 4 max. Do links work? They don't really work, and so think about like, hey, do you really want to embed the links, or how do you want to manage that? And so in terms of scheduling, right, like can you actually schedule or not? Right? And so hopefully some helpful tips. Another one that I think is interesting, right, is what is the average engagement as a duration of videos increase? And so really, we would say you want to aim for at least sort of 5 minutes or less, right? Because you really start to, you're getting into this 25%, people that stay through the entire duration. And then up to 60 seconds is really ideal, we think, for short form video content, right? And on TikTok, maybe even shorter, but 60, right? Try to keep it in that minute. A couple things. One of my favorite folks here in the sector is Mallory. She does a fantastic job. And one of the things I think I really admire is her social media posts, right? And so preview text, I think she does a really nice job of that, right? Remember, not everything you post actually gets shown, right, on social media. It's really that top little snippet, right? And so Mallory does a great job because she makes sure she catches your attention, like a gazillion mistakes. So like, oh, well, I'm now interested to click see more and read more. And Carly, you'll see your name right here too. Some other ones, right? The images, of course, are great because you can't really clip the image, right? And so image actually gives you a lot more real estate, and videos is the same. So that's another reason to use imagery or videos. And again, right, make sure you have something pithy up here that you're able to support what you're trying to share. All right. The next little piece here is Chris already did a really great job around how do you create stories? What are the things that you can do? One of the things I think is really interesting, though, when you're looking at these videos and trying to interview your volunteers, I think an opportunity that you can leverage here is really talking to objections that people might have, especially around volunteering. So, oh, I can't volunteer because I'm too busy. I don't have the time. It's too far away, right? I don't have the skills. I don't think I can't help people. I can't help veterans, right? Like, what do I know? And or like, hey, I'm really shy. I don't want to be in front of a lot, and so you have all these objections. And yeah, you can write about them, and that's fine. But a video from a volunteer is so much more powerful, right? I can just interview you and say, hey, Chris, real quick, I know you used to be concerned about time constraints and volunteering here. How did you make that work for you? And Chris will be, oh yeah, I was concerned, but the flexibility is great. I could just carve out an hour here and there. And then now you're selling not only the experience, but you're addressing that objection someone has potentially volunteering with you, right? And you can put that on your social profiles here. Here's a few other ones: fear of commitment, distance travel, health concerns, and some talking points that you might have here as well, right? And then the next thing I think that's important to remember is, whether that's recruiting for volunteers or other ways to engage on social media, is that people don't remember what we do, right? Like we always think people know what we do, right? Or our mission and why we're here. And maybe you feel like you've been, shouting it from the rooftops, and everyone should know this, right? Everyone knows what Habitat for Humanity does. Everyone should know what Boys and Girls Clubs are. I'm here to tell you, even those brands, that is not true, right? People might have even heard of the brand, but they might think Habitat. Yeah, it sounds, yeah, I think it's a nice sized nonprofit. It sounds like it's one that I might support. It's like, oh no, they build homes. Like, oh, right. Like it's a no dud to us. But coming back to that, I think is an easy way, right, to have to have content, but also you know, don't think that you're oversharing that mission, right? And the other thing to think about is connecting your post back to your mission. And so even in those objections or other videos you have, right, the ones that Chris shared with you, you can circle back to your mission, right? And so one of my friends who's a startup owner that I really admire, he talks about, he landed in the US the other day, he's going through custom, and he's talking about this, beautiful story about being an immigrant and da-da-da, what that means to him. And the company he has helps hourly workers, right? And he brings it back to that and he says, every time I come back, I'm just reminded how lucky I am. I think about my parents sacrificing, doing hourly jobs to bring me to, and that's why I'm committed to our mission of, making the deskless economy the best it can be. Like, oh, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, but all of your volunteering stories in some way can connect back to your mission, right? And so trying to do that again and again and again, I think is worthwhile. And the last thing that I think is really interesting and sort of couples well with the topic that we talk a lot about is when you're recording these videos, you are actually hearing the words that your volunteers use to describe you, to describe what they do, to describe the reasons that they volunteer, to describe the impact your organization has on others, as on them, right? And that's really powerful in that I think, again, so many of us are so deep within our organizations, we're so embedded all the time on how we talk about it, how we think about the organization, that just listening to what words they use can be super powerful. And then you can borrow that, right, as you're writing your pithy little, tweet or Instagram caption, right, use their words, because those words are much more likely to actually resonate with other volunteers, because that's how volunteers describe and think about you, right? And so language market fit is a sort of a slightly more structured way to uncover that language, right? And so and there's sort of a process, right? You could draft some headlines, ask your 5-year-old or whoever, right? Do you understand what I just wrote, right? And then you can do some testing. And this last piece is really optional, right? But I think the whole idea of just like leaning into the language that people use. And we have a webinar, so we'll put the links in here as well. So if you want to learn more about language market fit, feel free to watch our previous webinar that we did. And then Chris talked about this as well, right? Like creating these emotionally charged moments and capturing that on video, right? One of the best examples I like to think of is sometimes you can make things very simple. And I often use this example with the tomato soup can, because we just had, toy drives, food drives. And a lot of times we're just like picking up food, we're dropping it off, right? Like it is what it is. But you can make small tweaks to that experience to make it emotionally something that people remember, right? So you can ask people, bring your favorite canned food, right? Favorite thing. And then when we get there, we're going to go around in a little circle and we're going to share that story. And by the way, we're going to capture that on video, of course, right? But now when I think about the organization in this act of dropping off the food, I don't just think about like, oh yeah, it's a thing. It's a way for me to clear out my pantry, right? But it's like, oh, I also connect it to this like very powerful moment where I talked about like my grandma and how, this item, or maybe my love of Oreos, right? Like I now connect it to like, oh, I'm actually giving something I personally love to somebody else. Like I'm sharing something that's very cool, right? And then of course, right, we want to measure impact, and we could go into a full webinar on this, but I think the interesting thing for me here is really thinking about two things. What matters for your organization? Why are you doing all of this to begin with? Is it to recruit more volunteers? Is it to drive awareness? And to whom? Like, who do you want to drive awareness with? And so first thinking through that, like, why am I doing this? And then identifying, how do I measure my success with that? And an easy way could be, right, I want my social channels to drive new volunteers, recruitment. Well, you can have a Google form, right? That captures that information specific just to your social media channel. So you know everything that goes to that form is from social, right? And that way, anytime you get something, you could say, hey, now, when I posted content or I did video content that Chris is telling me to do, hey, it actually worked, right? I got a bunch more response from folks. But this I think is important, right? And there's obviously more complicated ways you could do attribution tracking on Google Analytics, et cetera. But there's also like very simple ways, right? Like you could just have a form that people fill out after they see something, right? Or it could be that you're looking to drive awareness, right? And with who, and a lot of times these platforms have analytics, so you could say, hey, who is your audience? Where are they from? And you could say, hey, I just want to look at my LinkedIn, people based in Buffalo. How many people based in Buffalo follow my LinkedIn? And that's my metric for success, right? And I don't actually care about the 2,000 other people that happen to, like us, right? And then finally, a couple other things real quick, right, is replacing stock images with authentic videos, right? I think authenticity is sort of very much in vogue these days. So replace the left with something like the right is great. And then another great volunteering opportunity is actually to be a volunteer photographer or videographer. It's relatively simple. A lot of people have a passion for taking pictures, right? And so you could leverage that skill set. And by the way, then you don't have to do it, right? You have somebody that's dedicated, and like Chris said, someone that's tasked to be that collector of content for you. So that's it. I'll stop sharing. I'll let Sir Carly head over to the Q&A here for us.
Wow, thanks so much for all of that information. Chris and Gung, that was like fact after fact. It was amazing. I feel like hopefully everybody, when you get the recording and you get the slides later, you can go back and, rewrite down all those things that you probably jotted down. But yes, let's hop into Q&A because like I said, we had so many great questions. So let's hop right in. My first question is for Gung. This one was submitted by Michael. And the question is, how do you handle cross-platform attribution tracking and what tools and workflows do you employ? So I know you just talked a little bit about that, but specifically cross-platform attribution.
Yeah, attribution can be tough, right? Like, and I think generally most marketers, I think, do. The hard part is if you want to say, oh, well, they saw our Facebook page and they came from Twitter, and I'm gonna divvy it up, and everything gets like a 20% attribution. I am more of the perspective that like first come first serve. Like they saw us first on Twitter, so Twitter gets the wins, right? And in terms of like where I'm gonna attribute things. What we so again, for folks that maybe don't have the budget or want to start simple, right? Like a form collection is a really easy way to do that. You could see exactly. Google Analytics will tell you where people are coming from if you're just looking at website traffic. And so you could see like, hey, people are coming from Facebook, they're coming from Twitter, etc. If you want to get a little bit more sophisticated, right? Like you could use platforms like a HubSpot, like a Salesforce, that allows you to see for any constituent or where their journey has been over time, right? They'll say like, hey, they landed on your page, right? You could use some tools like Intercom as an example also tracks that. So that's the little chatbot you see in a lot of places, but they'll still note, Chris came and this is the third time he's been here, and maybe he's a question mark, or a Fox icon for a little while, but then as you know who he is, right, it'll actually tell you that, oh, this is actually Chris and here's his email. Those are some other tools that I think are interesting, right? There's obviously social specific platform, but those are my sense is for the vast majority of nonprofits probably a little bit overpriced and overpowered.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like maybe your CRM that you already are using has these kinds of tools and maybe you just haven't implemented them yet, and that's definitely something to look into. That's great advice. Okay, my next question is for Chris. And this is actually a combined question from Brooke and Clarissa. So the question is, how can a person who has no experience in creating video or using editing software succeed in creating effective video? And I think to just keep going with that, what's a good free software for editing video?
Cool. Yeah. This is talking my language because despite running a tech company, I'm not very tech savvy. I can admit that.
You're not supposed to tell people that.
No, I mean, there's a lot of cool tools out there, and there's probably ones that I've never heard of. But the top ones, right? iMovie, if you have iOS. Clipchamp is sort of the new one on the Microsoft side of things. But honestly, my answer is very straightforward. Canva, Canva, Canva. I highly recommend everybody get themselves their free Canva account that they can get as a nonprofit. There's some hoops you have to jump through, but it's definitely worth it. And you'll be able to create a ton of, because it's not just creating like a mashup video, right? It's also creating a cool something that goes on Facebook or Instagram, and you can shape it to the different types of content and package it in all these different ways. I think Canva's just such a home run that I highly, highly recommend it. And even I can use it. So it's pretty, I tried to get into like Adobe and I tried to teach myself how to use all these platforms. And I'm like, no, this isn't happening. So I just use the easy ones. And we actually have what caused us to build a Canva integration. MemoryFox actually integrates with Canva because of this, because it's so amazing. We're like, we could build our own video editor. We're like, no, we could make a simple one, but Canva does a really good job. And you can just drag your content right into Canva, and then you can make all kinds of really cool stuff. So I could talk about Canva all day, so I won't. But my answer is Canva.
I love that answer. I'm on Canva. I have to be like a super user probably at this point. And I guess just expanding on that, over to Gung, are there any other tools that might be good for people if they just aren't tech savvy?
Man, I feel like Chris already stole my thunder there. So I'll just reiterate, like, we love Canva as well. I think the templates, Stacy in the chat mentioned that, right? Like, and the fact that it's actually free for nonprofits, right? Like it's not super expensive. You have to pay for it, but it is not insubstantial. And the fact that they give it away for nonprofits is really kudos to them, and something that everyone should really take advantage of.
I love that. Okay, let's see. Back over to Chris. This is a question from Jay. Is quality of phones good enough to create video content?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I'm not sure MemoryFox would necessarily exist if it wasn't true. Because 99.9% of our content is collected via phones. No, you can do amazing content now, and I think a lot of people are learning that if they haven't learned it already. Certainly there is a place for videographers and video editors and agencies that can give you that really, really once a year, maybe twice a year, the holy cow, that's a great video. But 99% of the time, the rest of the time, just cameras. I mean, just use your cameras on your phones. And in a lot of ways, it's a cheat code, right? Because you are collecting from your mission beneficiaries. It is user-generated content. And there's a reason that it is the most coveted content. Big brands spend millions, billions of dollars a year trying to present themselves like nonprofits, using all kind, to be authentic and be all these things. No, you guys are the authentic ones. Like, this is what we do, is everything we do is authentic. And so in a way, that raw video, that raw content performs better because it's authentic. And I think a lot of nonprofits feel like they need to compete with Nike, or they need to compete with these big brands, and you do not. Just get your story out there. Phones are good enough to collect great content, and that's how you stand out in the attention economy, is like good grassroots video. That is your cheat code. And I think we do everything we can to help you do that, but definitely be doing it on your own too.
That's such a good point. Yeah, it's really DIY. I mean, most people have a smartphone at this point. It's super easy to do. If you're just thinking about, oh, this is a great event, maybe just pop out your camera, get a photo. You probably already took photos anyway, but let's submit it to the nonprofit afterwards.
Yeah, the challenge with smartphones is not that they're not taking high quality content. It's how do you get it from people?
Yeah,
right? You could set up a Dropbox, you can have them text message it to you, but like, I'm in a text message group with my parents and my family, and I ruin every video because I'm the only person with an Android. So I mean, like, so text message really isn't great. Email is not really that great. Well, there's my sister Danielle. Yes, it's true. But yeah, so like it becomes more about how do you get that content from people rather than the video itself.
Well, Danielle's going to kick you out of the family, at least the group chat. My next question, let's kick it back over to Gung. We have a question from Justine. The question is, how do I create a balance between captivating reels that portray volunteerism or events versus educational posts about our organization? So is there an ideal ratio, or what would you say to that, Gung?
I think I saw that question come through earlier, and Justine may even have an answer in part because it sounds like for her, they have a pretty big discrepancy on like which ones really resonate, right? You know, my thought is right, like having a mix is great, but really coming back to that what I said earlier around like why are you doing this, right? Like no, you know, all of us have a gazillion things we could be doing, right? And I think video is a fantastic way to get your story out there, but understanding, you know, the driver of that, right? And so, you know, let's say, you know, your posts from your volunteers really drive more clicks and more interest and engagement, right? But does it also help you with recruiting, right? Does it help you with the thing that you really care about? And if so, then you know, go make that 90%, right, of what you're posting, right? Like I'm very much into the, you know, double down on the thing that's working for you, right? And what you could also do, right, like I said earlier, is tie it back to your mission, right? It doesn't have to be just one or the other, right? That volunteer story, you can easily say, hey, like a quick follow-up, right? And how does that tie back to the mission? How does that, you know, right? And so I think you can probably do a little bit of both, but you know, follow, you know, what do you want to get out of it, and what does the metric tell you that is the best solution, right?
Definitely. Okay, I know we are wrapping up, but I just have a quick last question for Chris. Chris, this question came from Stacy, and we are wondering, should a volunteer fill out a consent form to be placed on the organization's website or on their social media channel? You're on mute.
Got to make sure I'm on mute for the kids upstairs. No, everything is about consent. Consent is maybe the most important thing you'll do in the whole process. And consent is not it is not in perpetuity. It is you collect consent originally, and years later, if you choose to share that content again, you need to go get a consent again, especially if it's something if it's not, you know, but I mean, if it's something sensitive, consent, it does not exist in a single state of time. It is, you need to continuously do that and make sure when you get consent, you drop it in that folder that you're using where all the content is. So you keep everything together because you might need that consent. But always, always, always consent. We try to make it easier in MemoryFox. We're always kind of trying to build that more. But yeah, digitize it, get it in your shared drive, make sure you don't lose it, because consent is ethical storytelling is the most important piece of all of this. And I got to give a shout out to Carly because she's about to release our ethical storytelling white paper and survey that we collected from a lot of thought leaders throughout the industry. I think you guys will really, Gung, I think you submitted too. So we got really good info on there. And I think you all will really enjoy it because the ethics of storytelling is something we didn't really address too much today, but it is just as important as the rest of it. And so I can encourage you to check that out and really take a look at your practices.
Well, yeah, thanks. I love that we are trying to talk more about ethical storytelling. I think the whole sector is going in that direction, so that's really exciting. But now with our final few minutes, I do want to kick it back over to Chris, who is going to share just a little bit about MemoryFox, and then we will wrap up with Gung doing the same about Civic Champs, because you guys are here obviously representing wonderful brands, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear a little more. So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm glad we have the opportunity to do this because obviously we put a lot of work into it, but it's a very simple, straightforward platform, right? It is a platform that helps you collect stories from your community, keep them all organized in one place, and then share them along all of your, well, really package it and then share it along all of your fundraising channels. So you can see there in the share step, we have the Canva integrations. You just drag your stories right into there, and then you can, do what you need to do to package them and then get them out into the world. Building a lot of cool stuff. We're trying to figure out how to integrate AI and all kinds of things to be able to better serve and better track consent and make sure that you're following best ethics practices when sharing your story. I think as we kind of push into this AI world, it's going to be more and more difficult. And we want to really be your ally when it comes to that, to make sure we're all doing things the right way and not being exploitative. So yeah, if you ever want a demo or anything like that, feel free to check us out on the website, email me personally, or get a hold of Carly or someone on our team. And we'd love to show you how it works.
Cool. And I'll share my screen here too. And similarly do something very quickly here in the last minute or so that we have. And so Civic Champs, right, we try to be there for every stage of the volunteer process for volunteer managers. And so we have a lot of platforms. One of them that you're seeing here is our mobile app, right? And so it allows you to do seamless check-ins, like people can just tap, check in, pick the opportunity. It starts a little timer. We'll automatically check people out at the end of the day. We also have a kiosk for people to use if they don't, they don't have a phone. And of course, you as an admin can also manage all your volunteers as well. Other things that we do as an example, right? So if you're thinking about at the end of this the day, we collect feedback. And so you're thinking about retention of your volunteers. This could be really critical, right? Knowing if someone didn't have a great experience, but also if they did have a great experience, right? These are your champions. These might be folks that you want to ask for those video testimonials as well, and to reach out to them. And then finally, right, we bring all of this back in really easy to use dashboards with really powerful filters, the ability to see all this content, with big metrics at the top that you can easily pull for any date period, right? And so, again, like Chris, we work super hard on this, but if folks are interested in reaching out, feel free to, contact us. Here's my contact information. Again, we'll share all of this out with everyone. And the last little promo we'll toss out there is, for our webinar guests, we always offer a sort of 2-month free for webinar guests. And so if you book through before February 15th, that's sort of the offer that we have right now. But with that, yeah, thanks so much, Carly and Chris, for doing
Thanks,
this
everybody.
with me.
This was great.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Chris and Gung, thank you for preparing so much really great information for our audience. And thank you all for committing a little portion of your January to us. I know you're all very busy, so we're just really appreciative of that. And have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck as you fundraise all year long.
Tell great stories.
That's right. Thanks, everyone.
Great day.